Ashley C. Ford, welcome to Livewire.
Woohoo! Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
We are really excited that you were able to make time for the show. I know you're super busy because this book is already a giant hit, as well it should be.
It's doing well, guys. It's really doing well.
Let's kind of start a little bit at the beginning of your story. You grew up in Fort Wayne, Indiana. I'm curious, like, what kind of kid were you? Like, what were you into?
I was a kid who had more influence than she realized because I was, I would not say nonchalant. I was a pretty passionate kid.
You're pretty chalant.
I was pretty chalant. You knew how I felt. But I was really good at articulating myself from a young age, mostly because I watched a lot of TV and I wanted to talk like people on TV. So I was really good at articulating myself and my thoughts and ideas. And so that made me kind of formidable to adults. And sometimes then my peers would listen to me more than they would listen to adults. Whether I accepted that or rejected it, it didn't matter. That's just how it was. But I was also a very, very inwardly anxious child, very anxious. I always had something going on in my head, some pondering about what was happening in the world and how it would affect me, and also how my decisions were affecting the rest of the world. I just had an outsized idea of those things. But I was also like a lot of fun. You know, I'm a theater kid. I'm a theater kid. The thing that I was part of first, that was like a community program for kids or anything in Fort Wayne. You know, I was part of the Boys and Girls Club, but that
the positive place for kids.
The positive place for kids. And I loved it. And that led me to being part of this thing that was in partnership with the Fort Wayne Civic Theater called Showbiz Kids. And I loved it. Like, I just absolutely love theater. I had some nervousness, obviously. I had some stuff going on in my life at home that was really hard. And being able to perform and sort of pretend to be something else, something bigger, something different for a little while was really important to me.
Did you really try to sort of commit as much of Romeo and Juliet as you could to memory? Because you were anxious that, like, you would lose your copy of the book or it would be stolen or something?
Well, here's the thing. This is actually an interesting story because one of the things that I didn't put in the book that I think would have made a little more sense with the Romeo and Juliet thing is that my mom at one point got really upset with me for leaving my books around the house. And so when I was gone at school and she was home one day, she threw away all my books.
Wow.
She threw away every single one. I kept them in this big plastic tub and she threw them all away. She put them on the corner for the trash man. He came and got them. I came home and didn't have any books anymore. And I got the Romeo and Juliet book because the way I started rebuilding my book collection was joining the summer reading program at the library. And it was one of the books I could win by reading other books, because that's how summer reading programs work. You read a bunch of books and then they're like, great, now we can give you the books you want to own. And I really wanted Romeo and Juliet, so I got it. And I did. I started to commit it to memory. I started to... I had a notebook that was definitely supposed to be used for school that I did not use for school. I used it to copy as much of the book as I could into my notebook. And then you take the notebook to school and everybody thinks it's a school notebook. And when you're reading it, they're like, oh, look at her going over her notes. And I'm like, yeah, Juliet is the East and I'm the Sun. You know what I mean? Like that,
Wow.
like that was my, you know, that was what I wanted to do. And so I was really sneaky. I was really good at finding ways to do whatever I wanted to do.
This is Livewire. We were talking to Ashley C. Ford. Her new book is Somebody's Daughter. It's a memoir. You write a lot about your relationship with your mom, which is complicated. And also a lot of this book is about your relationship with your father, which was also complicated because he was incarcerated when you were very young.
Yes.
What kind of role did he play in your mind? What sort of space did your father take up in your life as a kid when he was not physically there?
I've read something recently that said we are hardest on the parent who stayed or the parent who stuck around, which is absolutely true for me as a kid. And that I think was added to, or it was, I guess, bonded by the fact that my mom's way of like saying I love you and I care about you and stuff like that was just, working really hard and paying the bills and making sure things
Showing
were
up.
taken care of. And it's not that she never said I love you. It's just that my mom has such an allergy to vulnerability that her way of saying I love you was to be like, look at me. I love you. Okay? Don't let anybody ever say I didn't love you. Don't ever get it in your head that I don't love you. I do. And you would be like, oh, okay. Like, it was very aggressive, but it was also like, that was her way of being like, it just occurred to me that I really need you to understand that I love you and that maybe I don't say that enough. And maybe maybe I'm not tender enough or things like that. So I would be like, okay. And, you just kind of accept her as she is. But my father wrote me these letters that were full of this florid language about the way he saw me and the way he thought of me and how much he thought of me and how much he loved me. And, I'm his favorite girl and I'm the most beautiful girl in the world and I'm smart and I'm brilliant and he's so proud. And, somebody sent him a copy of my report card and, oh my God, my daughter has A's and this and that. And, it was always such a celebration of me when my dad sent me a letter. Like, there were hints of his sadness and his loneliness, obviously. But his letters were just full of like this love and joy that he wanted to imbue in me. And he didn't get the opportunity to be around so much that he made the regular dad mistakes or the regular parent mistakes that anybody would and most likely will make. So my relationship with him it was real in that like he was out there and I was here and we knew of each other and we loved each other, but it was unreal in that all the gaps that were filled in about who he was were filled in by my child imagination. And that only lasts for so long. Childhood is only here for so long. So eventually it had to change.
Yeah, and as you write in the book, a big shift in how you regarded him was when you found out what he had actually gone to jail for, which was rape and sexual assault, which was also something that you had suffered through yourself.
Yes.
Just before getting that information. What was it like for you when you realized why he was actually in jail, based also on your personal experience?
It was earth and identity shattering. We have so many ways that we think about love and that we think about the people that we love. And most of that is pretty uncomplicated on the surface. Most of it, it might hurt, it might not last, all of those things, but it's all just a lot of like confusion and affirmation and trying to figure it out. When somebody does something like rape, like sexual assault, at the time, it was my belief that I was supposed to be able to shut off every positive thing I felt about him. I suddenly felt like you should be able to just stop right now. You should never read another letter. You should never take another phone call. You should never think of him in that way again, in a positive way, in a way that like my dad loves me. Because how can a person who loves you do something like this to someone else? And what does that mean about you? I thought it meant something about me. What does it mean that the person who seems to love me most in the entire world is a person who could do something like that? And so it was all wrapped up. For a while, I was convinced that what had happened to me happened. because of what my dad had done. I thought, growing up in the church and stuff like that, and the sins of the father are revisited upon the child, it made sense to me that what had happened to me might be a payment in some kind, a punishment in some kind for what my father had done. And it took me a really long time to accept and understand that my love for my father was not an acceptance or I don't even want to say an acceptance because it happened, so you have to accept it. It was not condoning what he had done. It was not forgiveness for what he had done. I didn't think that was my place to forgive him for something he did to other people. I would never try to do that, because if someone tried to forgive my rapist for me, the anger that I would feel at that would be insurmountable. I don't know how I would ever get over the anger I would feel about someone saying that they forgave my rapist for me. So I would never want to do that. But I do not want to deny that there is a human there and a relationship. And it is a love that I choose because it exists. I could deny it. I could absolutely deny. I could say, like, yeah, I love you, but don't want anything to do with you ever for the rest of my life. But that would be denying myself what I want.
Yeah.
And I don't think I need to be punished. I don't think I don't need to deprive myself because of someone else's decisions. Like, yeah, you did this and it's fucked up, and you still have to be my dad. I'm going to make you figure out how to be my father.
We're talking to Ashley C. Ford about her new memoir, Somebody's Daughter, and I've been following your work for a while now, and I find it so interesting that this is the book that you put out, because I think if someone asked me, what do you know about Ashley C. Ford? Before this book, I would say, so funny, so smart, just like so outgoing. You could have, I feel like, written a hit memoir that was like heavy on the pop culture and just like, you didn't have to go here with this book. I'm wondering why it is that you chose to go here.
I needed somebody to go there for me. When I was a kid, I'm a reader. I'm a big reader, always have been. You don't think I searched for my story in everything I ever read? Every single thing I read, I looked for myself and I looked for my story. It is so hard to find a story about an incarcerated person that focuses in any way on the family that is left behind when that person is incarcerated. You almost never read about that. You almost never hear stories about that because people don't really care about us. In general, we are considered the sort of like, what do you call it when when a cop's go on a cop chase and they mess up a car that like is not involved, but they're technically not responsible for it. Collateral damage. There you go. Couldn't get that here for a second. But we're collateral damage. Like, that's what the families of the incarcerated are. People feel like they are punishing the incarcerated person through us. Through us. That's why it's so hard to maintain a relationship with a person who is incarcerated. It's not just the isolation. It's not just the distance. It's how much phone calls cost. It's how much emails cost. It's how much it costs to put money on someone's books. It's how long it takes to get to a prison. Knowing that when you get there, you still might have to wait half a day, and you still might not be able to see the person that you came to see. Bringing kids into that environment is terrible. Like, it's terrifying for them. And as much as the incarcerated person might want to see their children, there are a lot of incarcerated people who are like, please don't ever bring my child into this building. As much as I love them, please don't bring them here. And that separation from their relationships and from their humanity and it does not help the rehabilitation process for most people. And so when I decided to write this book, and when I decided to write the book this way, I knew that there would be people who would be like, interesting book for Ashley to write, because normally she's just making me laugh, or she's doing something that I'm like, oh, that's cool or fun. And that is who I am. That is absolutely who I am. Everything in this book is also who I am. And I carry every piece of it with me every day. So if I'm going to write you a memoir, if I'm going to tell you about who I am, I'm not going to tell you what you can probably figure out by having followed me on Twitter for 2 years. I'm going to tell you who I am. And I'm going to do that because I needed it and somebody else out there needs it. Lots of people need it. And lots of people need to feel empowered to tell their stories exactly as they are.
That makes me think about something that you said right when we started talking about Romeo and Juliet, of all things, this book that you wanted at the library and that you read a million other books so that you could get it. It is a story about love, but it's that superficial love. You know, it's two people and they see each other and they love each other and then it's over. And I mean, the real complexities, I think, are between like the mothers and the nurses in the play. But like that's how we're taught to love each other, is through these stories. So even the parts of your book that are about like mother-daughter relationships, which are quite complex, we don't have books that talk about that, and in the same way as. And I would assume that making that complexity for a book like yours must have been just so difficult to keep the love and the frustration at equal caliber, or whatever caliber they deserved, moving from page 1 to page 200. Did you have like a strategy for making sure that complexity was present?
I knew that I didn't want to write heroes or villains. I knew that I wanted to write about human beings. It's a true story, right?
Right.
It's the truth of me, and it's supposed to be the truth of how I see all of these other people in my life. And I don't see heroes and villains when I look at my mom or my dad or, any of my mom's boyfriends or my siblings, my grandparents, my cousins, uncle, whatever. Like, I don't see heroes and villains when I look at them. I see human beings. I see family members. I see flawed, exquisite people. And I wanted to write a book that reflected what I saw, not just me and what I experienced, but it's from my perspective. It's what I saw. And I think it's really easy in some cases to write heroes and villains in memoir. But if you're writing about humanity, then you want to write from a place of reality. And the reality is we all have the capacity for extreme good and extreme evil.
Yeah.
We all have the capacity for it. And we express ourselves in all ends and in all places along that spectrum over the course of a lifetime. There's what we talk about, there's what we don't talk about, and there's what happened. Right?
Right.
Yeah.
And I wanted to write about what happened. I didn't want to write about, well, this is the thing that I think we all know about and we should all talk about, or this is the thing I think we all know to stay away from. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to say this is what happened, and I wanted to say it in a way that hopefully was relevant to the narrative of my life and could be a story that people felt compelled to follow. And I think truly that when you tell the truth and when you give people something to hold on to that's based in reality, they will follow you to the end of the line. So if you can tell a good story and if you can make it as real as possible, you've got a reader. And if you've got a reader, you've got an opportunity for somebody to feel you. And if you've got an opportunity for somebody to feel you, you've got another chance for human connection. And that's always the goal for me. I want other human beings to feel me. And if they feel me, then I did my job.
You get your flowers.
Yeah, right?
then I
Your
get
Publishing
flowers.
Day flowers. Speaking of potential readers of this new book, which, by the way, is Somebody's Daughter, it's a memoir from Ashley C. Ford. Have either of your parents read the book yet?
No, actually. All three of my siblings have. After it came out. They all waited until after it came out to read it. And I got messages from all three of them this week that, sorry. Sorry. I got messages from all three of them this week about how much they loved it and how much they love me and how they feel like they see me more clearly. And that, you know, both of my brothers were like, you know, it just makes me want to hold you. It just makes me want to hug you so hard. And, you know, my brother that's closest in age to me that, you know, so much of this we went through together. He said, you know, this filled in so many pieces for me when I felt alone and when I felt like nobody was hearing me or talking to me about what was going on around us. And I just really wish that I had been less afraid and I had said more to you about how I was feeling. And it was just this moment where I finally got to, you know, have that conversation with my brother, you know, and say, who would have taught us? Who would have shown us how to have that conversation? How would we have known? There's no way that we would have known how to have that conversation with one another. And so we can have that conversation now and we can talk about it now. And that's good enough for me. I don't ever want you to feel regret. I don't ever want you to feel like you failed me in some way. You have not. You've loved me the whole way through it. And that's all I needed. So that's been fantastic. My dad would like me to hand it to him myself. So I had to wait till his vaccine was fully marinated and I get and I get through this
Promotional phase.
This promotional
Junkets.
time. And the junkets, and then I can drive up to Fort Wayne and hand it to him myself. My mother will probably never read it. She's just the kind of person that if there's something she doesn't want to know, she's like, I'm not going to look in there. So
is that a slight relief to you, or do you wish that she could read this and really understand some things about your experience that maybe she doesn't understand?
At this point, it's neither. I have accepted who my mother is. I love her just as she is. And because I love her, I trust her to take care of herself. I trust her to know what she needs to do in order to take care of herself. So the truth is, I have always been kind of like there is a chance she'll read it, and I have to prepare myself for that, you know, and I've talked to her about that and let her know, if you read it, let's talk about it. Let's have a conversation. Don't feel like you can't finish the book and call me immediately. Don't feel like you can't be in the middle of the book and call me. Like, you can do that. I would prefer if you read the whole thing before you did, but the door is open, you know? But my expectation for her to read it is just not there. So there's not really the room to have like relief that she didn't, or sadness that, you know, she hasn't or that she possibly won't. I'm lucky to be at a place of like extreme acceptance with my mother in that way, knowing that I don't need her to read it, I guess is the best way to say it. Would I like her to? I'm not sure. I'm actually not sure if I would like her to, but I know that I don't need her to. And I know that if she does, I'm ready and willing to have a conversation after.
A person that we know has read the book and really appreciated it is Oprah Winfrey, because I saw her tweeting about it. I know that I know you're gonna do an interview with her in a few days. I mean, are you even able to process the fact that like you and Oprah are sort of friends now, and that she really admires your work? Like, how does one even take in that information?
Gail is Oprah's friend. I am some chick who wrote a book.
But if the interview goes well, I mean, look, at some point, Gail and Oprah weren't friends yet, so maybe you're in the before
50
phase.
years ago.
Maybe so. Maybe so. Maybe this is the moment. But I'm so excited. I'm not really nervous. I don't really get nervous about these kinds of things. I get excited, and then sometimes I get nervous about my excitement because I'm always worried that excitement leads to disappointment. But I am excited. Like I'm very excited to talk with her. You know, Oprah and I don't know. There's no way she would know this, but she has been this, like, I know, like a national figure. Like everybody has like an Oprah moment. I think of like, Oprah said this thing that really helped me, or I read this book that Oprah suggested and it was great. You know, everybody I think has been a little bit touched in some way by Oprah Winfrey. But I was convinced for years that there was something about Oprah's trajectory in her life and mine that were like lining up. And it used to really like mess with me because I was like, this, I will never meet this person. I will never know this person, you know? So why am I making these connections? You know, like she launched OWN at the same time that I was at like one of the worst places in my life. I was about to be homeless. I ended up moving in with this family that I had nannied for because the place where I was about to move into was not technically really a place you live. And they saw it and were like, absolutely not. And would not unpack my things from the car and took them to their house and turned what had been the husband's man cave into an apartment for me. And I was down there, sitting there, like feeling super emotional about the fact that I'm living in these people's like house. And as much as I love them and care for them, I feel like a burden. And why can't I get my shit together or my stuff together? Like, why is this happening? And all of a sudden it's like, OWN launches. And I'm like, well, you know what? Let me turn on some OWN. And I turn it on. And it's Oprah, and she's doing this master class. And in that masterclass, she's talking about her life. And this is a way that I've never heard about Oprah's life before. I didn't know about her as a child. I didn't know about things that had happened to her. I didn't know about how much she had overcome to become Oprah, how much she had accepted about herself in order to become Oprah. And I watched it and I was just thinking, like, is this for me? Like, like I was sitting there, and I think when you're really low and you are open to things like signs, like it's easy for anything positive to start looking like a sign. And in that moment, I was just like, this is a sign. Like, things are going to be okay. I'm going to get better. I'm going to figure this out. And I mean, like a week later, I had my first publication. Like, I broke up with the guy who broke up with me first in a poem that ended with, and you can go to hell, Ashley Ford.
What rhymes with that?
Nothing. Nothing at all. What rhymes with that? Terrible boyfriend. That's what rhymes with that. And I just started figuring it out. And so like, it's a full circle moment for me, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
That's amazing. Like you clearly identified something going on kind of cosmically in that moment with you and Oprah. And I mean, are you already trying to like decide if you're going to bring that up with her or not when you have the conversation?
Of course, because it's like, like everybody who meets her is probably like, Oprah, you know, one time,
yes,
this happened, you know, like that.
Yeah.
That is probably every single person who meets her.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I don't think my story is going to be that much more special than anybody else's, except for the fact that, you know, several years later, you decided you liked my book enough to put your name on it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that's the difference. And it does sometimes feel like magic, and it does sometimes feel like the cosmos like conspiring in my favor. But at the end of the day, it's really just like, I think she sees in my story something real and true that has probably reminded her of her story, but also reminded her of more and more girls' stories that she's encountered. Because Oprah works with girls so closely and she works with them so much. And I think that she had a very specific experience in her childhood and in her adolescence, in her time. And it has shifted a bit for girls of my generation, and young women of my generation, millennials and Generation Z and stuff. And I think that she sees that connection in our stories, that like, oh, this is what it's like for them now, or this is what it was like for them when I was very much on television and doing my thing. And, you know, she's a story lover. So I'm glad she loves my story. That makes me feel really good. But, you know, it's Oprah. It's Oprah. So it does, if she hated my story and talked about it, I would still sell more books. And and because she loves it and because she has been so kind to me, this experience of being a debut author for me has been unlike anybody else I've ever known. And how do you say thank you to somebody for that? How do you say thank you for making my experience one that nobody else gets? Thank you.
Wow. Yeah.
Wow.
That's huge.
Yeah, and I have to say too that you're talking about the way this book might speak to women and girls and their experience, but I can just tell you that it spoke to me, and I have a wildly different childhood experience. I mean, one of the things that's amazing about this book and how you're such a skilled writer, Ashley, is that I feel like this book brings up emotions and experiences that are just totally relatable to anybody. So I would recommend everybody get a hold of the book. It's Somebody's Daughter by Ashley C. Ford. We are honored to be the second most exciting interview that you do this week about the book. We're just going to claim the second place spot. We're going to give
Bronze
the top
medal.
one to Oprah.
Oh, wait, no. Silver
I'm going to
medal.
give it to you. I'm going to give it to you.
Okay,
Silver
cool.
medal.
We'll take it. Thank you very much for coming on Livewire. I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me. This is an amazing conversation. I appreciate you both.
All right. Well, Ashley, that was so much fun.